2021 meeting of the National School District Governing Board to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Recording Secretary, please call the vote.
Mr. Saber.
Present.
Ms. Gage.
Present.
Ms. Sarmiento.
Present.
Ms. Beneco Castañeda absent. Ms. Dara.
Present. Item 10A is to introduce and welcome the new employees. Dr. Hernandez.
Good evening. So we do have 4 new employees tonight, and we invite our new employees that when I call your name to please come up, and to receive your pin, you will stand up in front and we'll also take a picture. But because of COVID protocols, I do ask that the board president remain seated and hand the pin to our new employees. Thank you. Our first employee is Luis Lopez, custodian day, Kimball School. If you could please come up. Mr. Lopez has worked for the San Diego Unified School District since 2009 as a custodian crew leader. He previously worked for Hilton Hotels and Maintenance as an engineer. He holds training certificates in custodial technician training, occupational training services, and physical plant management for custodial services. Welcome, Mr. Lopez. Our next employee, Kenya Mendiola, preschool teacher. Ms. Mendiola holds a child development permit, bachelor's in education in child and family development from San Diego State University. She has worked as a preschool teacher since 2015 in public education and private sector. So currently we do believe she'll be at Palmer Way. Suzanne Pierce, teacher of special day class, early childhood, Olivewood School. Ms. Pierce holds an education specialist instruction credential in early childhood special education and a bachelor's in child and family development from the San Diego State University. She has worked as a special education teacher since 2007, working with the Jamul Dulzura Union School District, Alpine Union School District, and for National School. So when you see her, welcome Ms. Pierce.
Thank you.
And our next employee is Gloria Ramirez, Instructional Assistant, Special Education, Central School. Come on up, Gloria. Ms. Ramirez has worked with children as a caregiver and an instructional assistant since 2012. She worked at the Sweetwater School District and for the South Bay Respite Care. She holds an AA in Child Development from Southwestern College. Welcome, Ms. Ramirez.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez.
And to our new employees, you are welcome to leave at any time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Item 11 is public communications. Public communication provides the public with an opportunity to address the board regarding an item on the agenda or other topic. Anyone wishing to address the board shall submit a request for oral communications card. Cards are available near the entrance to the boardroom and are submitted to the recording secretary. A member of the public who wishes to address the board on any such matters are limited to 3 minutes for one matter, up to a maximum of 5 minutes for all matters. There shall be a limit of 20 minutes for any matter unless such time limit is waived by the majority of the board. No board action can be taken.
We don't have any speakers.
Thank you. Item 12A is to accept the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay. I have a motion by Ms. Sarmiento and a second by Ms. Lizarraga. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Item 13 is to approve the consent agenda routine items of business. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And I have a second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Gates and a second by Ms. Sarmiento. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
There are no items for general functions. Item 15 is educational services. 15A is to discuss clarifications to the National School District's local control and accountability plan for the 2021 through 2024 school year. Dr. Kraft.
Thank you, President Dalla. As usual, the board knows that the protocol for the LCAP approval is we submit the board-approved LCAP after the June meeting to the county. The county does do an additional read after that and provide us feedback. If the feedback they provide us changes the intent of the LCAP substantially, we would bring back the full LCAP for approval. However, National's feedback, as you saw in the clarification table that I provided for you in the board memo, you've had the opportunity to read, was not substantial. So attached to this item, you have the clarification table as well as the LCAP that reflects those changes, the new LCAP. And should the board approve this evening, we will post the LCAP on the website, get it translated again, and post the new translated version on the LCAP with the table.
Thank you. Any questions?
Will you remind us of the stakeholder voices that go into this discussion?
Into the LCAP?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're required to have both associations, parents, students, DLAC, DPAC. Is that what you're asking me? Okay.
Thank you.
And staff.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft. Item 15B is to amend Memorandum of Understanding, contract number CT3854 with San Diego County Superintendent of Schools to provide a multilingual California project grant for the National School District for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
And is there a second?
I second it.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I have a motion by Ms. Gates and a second by Ms. Lizarraga. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 15C is to approve Memorandum of Understanding CT3879 with Jewish Family Service to provide parent workshops for the National School District for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
I second it.
Is there any discussion?
I'm
Just wondering what kind of, have they done this for us before, and what kind of workshops have they provided, or will we look, or could we look for from them?
We have, we've had a long-standing partnership with the Jewish Family Services, and their workshops are generally focused on positive parenting, addressing, depending on what their offerings are, particular issues, mental health, teen, helping with homework. There's a variety of aspects that they approach around positive parenting.
I have a comment on that. I've taken it myself, and they're really expertise on the plan. They really answer questions, and they show you a lot of tips on how to deal with tantrums and positive behavior reinforcing, and they're really good at what they do.
Thank you. Any further questions? Ms. Sarmiento, do you have a question?
No.
Thank you. Okay. I have a motion by Ms. Sarmiento, second by Ms. Lizarraga. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Item 15D is to approve contract CT3880 with Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center to provide parent workshops for the National School District for the 2021-2022 school year.
I'm going to recuse myself on this item. Thank you.
I move to approve. And I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
My kids always loved Olivewood Gardens field trips. You know, the fact that they were at Las Palmas and it was around the corner and it's like so close in the neighborhood. And we were there when they opened and got to sit and like my family went down. And so I've seen and heard a lot of positive reports on what they do with their students. I've also know how much some of the other teachers who my children didn't have, but how much they appreciated the opportunity to be there and to have this as a resource right in our neighborhood.
Thank you. And the reason Ms. Lizarraga recused herself is because she is an employee of the Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Sarmiento and a second by Ms. Gates. Please vote.
Item passes 3 yes, 1 absent, 1 recused.
Thank you. Ms. Lizarraga, wait. She needs to come back. Okay. Item 15E is to approve agreement number CT 3882 with Expatiate Communications Incorporated to participate in the ITAP software pilot program in collaboration with the South County Special Education Local Area Plan in the San Joaquin County Office of Education. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second with a question.
Is there, okay, Ms. Gates.
If I can get that up there. I'm familiar with pilot programs when it comes to like curriculum. Is this, so one of the questions I'm asking is this our pilot program or their pilot through us? And then the other I'm wondering is what impact does this have on our employees and their time? Some of those types of things.
So this is in partnership with our SELPA, and the ITAP functions very similar to the other partnerships we had, which were Core Collaborative and their data analysis systems. And what it does provide us is projections on what our students, especially with particular our special education students, potential academic performance reports will be, such as on the dashboard. We are required to do a SELPA plan, and we have to also meet academic proficiency ratings within that plan. And so this will give us a better idea of it. It's just this year's pilot, and the data and the information it will provide for us will be very powerful as we are navigating post-closures.
Dr. Brady?
Yes, and just to add to that, the SELPA did approach us to ask us if we would be willing to pilot the software. They are developing it so that they can go mainstream and potentially offer this to other districts, but they want to work out the kinks before other districts sign up. So we'll be ahead of the game, get that predictive analysis by participating in the pilot. The reason this is coming forward to you is so that, one, you know that we're participating in it, but also the protections of student data. So this MOU protects the student data.
So it is a pilot program for us, but it is also their pilot program at the same time. So we're getting the opportunity to learn while they're learning. We're co-pilots.
Ms.
All right.
Lizarraga?
Yeah, I have a question regards the study that we approved a couple of meetings ago about the study about the behavior of the students leaving the district. Is this different than the other one, or it's just because it says to assist on that? Can you please clarify on that part?
Yes, so the demographic study that you approved at the last board meeting will help give us predictive analysis on students that are either moving to the district or leaving the district, what trends we can expect, where we can expect growth at what schools, and where we can expect maybe drops in enrollment, so we can make good decisions around, how to staff our schools in the future. This one is more on student achievement, and it is a software that can tell us ahead of time. So typically the students take the end of the year assessment for the state, and then later in the fall, that's in May, later in June, we get the results, and then we don't get the dashboard results that go out to the public that says this school is doing well or this school is not doing well until like November. So this would help us see what we could predict for those potential public announcements and try to course correct ahead of time. So it helps us to kind of see how our students are doing in more of a formative way, kind of like a physical exam at the doctor, instead of waiting until the end of the year when it's only an autopsy and you can't change the date.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
After the fact. Sorry. Dr. Kraft?
And the other last piece is the question was with respect to the impact on our employees. This will actually be quite helpful in helping to gather the information as we write compliance reports that we will need to submit we have to every year submit to the California Department of Education. So we see this as a positive co-pilot.
Ms. Gates?
Yes, because one of the things that we as teachers and staff and parents and students always worry about is we get that one shot at finding out what's going on with testing somewhere, not quite the end of the year. And so the not quite the end of the year also tells us we haven't taught everything, but the kids are still graded, still tested on it. So basically, you're saying that this is a formalized computer assessment, similar to our state testing. Is that what we're saying? That kind of gives a heads up along the way and will help us, will help our teaching staff to go, we're still struggling over place value with our numbers, and so I need to hit that better. Is it that kind of detailed? What kind of, what are we gaining from it?
So it provides us predictive analysis. So, for example, it does have the academic progress, which is one of our SELPA plans that we have to write. We have to write that where the students that have IEPs, where they're performing relative to their general ed counterparts. But in addition, there are compliance issues in equity, access, participation rate in general ed, percentage of time, those types of things. This will help us in planning that, and that is labor intensive for our teams as well as our director of special education. And so this is a software that, given the opportunity to kind of streamline that and be able to get the data maybe as in one push as opposed to 15, will help. And so when you were asked about the question about the staff, that made me realize that would be help to expedite some of these reporting pieces.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? I have a motion by Ms. Sarmiento and a second by Ms. Gates. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Item 16A is to approve the appointment of the attached peer assistance and review council members for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I have a motion by Ms. Sarmiento and a second by Ms. Lizarraga. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Item 17A is to approve the 2020-2021 unaudited actuals financial report. Mr. Amanesians?
I don't know how to use that.
Oh, yeah, you're done.
Good evening, Board. Tonight I'll be presenting the unaudited actuals. Unaudited actuals is a report that's due every year. It's an overview of what happened during the last fiscal year. So from July 1st, 2020 until June 30th, 2021, what actually happened. So all of the cash that came in, all the cash that went out, and all the liabilities we had to book, meaning accounting transactions we had to book in early. So we have to pass this, take it to the board by September 15th. We will send this report to the County Office of Ed after the board takes action on it. They have until October 15th to agree with our unaudited actuals. So kind of a highlight of where we are in our budget cycle. Unaudited actuals does update the budget for the new fiscal year. So for 21-22, the budget was updated to reflect changes between July 1st and now. The next report that I'll be bringing is the first interim in December. First interim is an update to the budget as of October 31st, 2021. Kind of an outlook of where the state is right now. Just to put it in general terms, the state is doing really well. The economy is doing extremely well at the moment. Tax receipts are coming in above projections. One downside of that is that the median home price has gone up considerably in the state. So as the economy does really well, more people want to purchase homes. Right now, the median cost of a home is $811,000 in the state of California. So it is considerably high to live in California. The national economy is doing well as well. All of the losses that we experienced due to COVID have been recovered as of the second quarter of 2021. So we recovered from the recession much more quickly than we did in the past recession in the 2006s and 2007s. So this is an overview of our Fund 1. Fund 1 is our general operating budget. It's broken down between estimated actuals. So the last time you saw what our budget looked like for last year, what we thought we would end the year at versus where we did actually end the year. So for local control funding formula, and this is our revenues, so the money coming in, we had a slight variance of $10,000, which is extremely good projection, meaning $10,000 considering the amounts. It's basically a rounding error. So we had a very good idea of what we would get in local control funding formula. Federal revenue was much lower than we projected, and part of that is because federal revenue is earned. So you spend federal revenue, like Title I, you spend it, and then you could book it as revenue earned. Until you actually spend it, you can't actually count on having it as revenue. So we did not spend that money. It will roll over into the next fiscal year. And Title I and federal revenue have a 27-month period for spending. So we do have time to spend that. Because we didn't spend it, we reduced our revenue. The other sources are other state revenue and other local revenue. And our total revenue variance was $6 million below what we projected in estimated actuals. This is an overview of our expenses for the year. Again, estimated actuals versus unaudited actuals and the variance. This is combined, so this is all unrestricted and restricted spending. Certificated salaries came in just below what we estimated. Classified salaries came in considerably lower than what we estimated, including employee benefits were lower. Books and supplies and services and other operating expenditures came in considerably lower than what we estimated, and really we could attribute that to having a majority of the year be in distance learning. It's hard to purchase items to be consumed on site when there's no students on site. So that's an anomaly. That's not something we will see this in the 21-22 fiscal year. So what does that mean in the bottom line? We actually have an ending fund balance lower than we had projected. Our operating expenses were lower than, our revenue was actually lower than our operating expenses were lower. So it came out to $8.8 million spent, not spent as much as we had anticipated. So our ending fund balance was $1.5 million lower than we anticipated. We had a beginning fund balance, which does not change, was $14.5 million. That leaves us with an ending fund balance of $23.4 million. Part of that is restricted, meaning it's we cannot count that towards our ending fund balance. It's $2.9 million. We have assignments of $17.6 million, and we'll go over that in the next slide. Reserve for economic uncertainty, that's 3% of our expenditures, is $2.1 million. You'll notice that that is lower than what we estimated because our expenses were actually lower. So we're required to cover all of our expenses. Since we had lower expenses, our ending fund balance our reserve was much lower. So $134,000 lower than we anticipated. That leaves us with a total unrestricted reserve of 27.67%, which was an improvement of 5%. So because our overall expenses were lower, our reserve is higher just because we don't have to cover as many expenses. So as an overview of our assignments, 5.3 million of that was LCAP carryover. Again, a lot of that was expenditures that were planned for in person. Because we did not have in-person learning, we were unable to spend those funds, which will carry over. We had department site carryover budgets from the 1920 fiscal year that we did notify the sites that we intended to carry over, which we will. It's $1.2 million. Curriculum adoption, that is quite a high number, 6.4 million, but that's based on the reality that we experienced during our last curriculum adoption. So that number reflects adopting 2 curriculum for science and social studies. Other post-employment benefits, that's an estimate for funding and other post-employment benefit trusts. Custodial support and materials for COVID. As we've experienced with COVID, we have much more need for more cleaning, more supplies. So we're estimating putting in $750,000 from unrestricted funds towards that throughout the year. Facilities and ground improvements. We have projects throughout the year, and really the only sources of funding we have is our 8150 resource that's ongoing maintenance, which almost 100% of that is in labor costs. So to do any kind of projects, we would have to supplement that with unrestricted funds. Currently, we're using Fund 40, which we are depleting at a very quick rate. Once Fund 40 is depleted, we will have to supplement those projects through Fund 1 unrestricted sources. If we don't supplement those projects will not get done. And examples of those are just replacing sewers, pipes that are eroding, doing things like landscaping and whatnot. Things that we would not be able to fund through Fund 25 or Fund 21 would fall upon the unrestricted general fund. And the last one is protection against future revenue loss. We do anticipate losing revenue in the future just because of lower enrollment and lower ADA, average daily attendance. So that 1.8 million is what we have set aside to help cushion the blow of the lower ADA funding in the future.
From the general fund?
Correct. So this is an overview of all of our other funds. We have multiple funds. Fund 8 is our new fund. That has to do with student activities, or ASBs. There is no beginning balance because this is the first year we've had it. It's $63,000 is the ending fund balance. So that's all of the assets that ASBs throughout our schools have will be in Fund 8. Child Development Fund ends at $368,000. Our Cafeteria Special Reserve Fund, Revenue Fund, that's our Child Nutrition Services Fund, ends at $2.6 million. They did very well this past year just because of the grab-and-go lunches. It was very popular, and $2.6 million. We do have to put a plan together for the state on how we do expect to spend down that money. We're only allowed to have 3 months of operating expenditures as reserve for Fund 13. Fund 14, there are no funds in that, no activity. Fund 21 is our bond fund. So any money issued in our general bond will go into Fund 21. That is funds that we do expect to spend down in the current fiscal year. Fund 25 is our developer fee fund. As you can see, we end the year with $2.8 million. County School Facilities Fund is an old fund that we hope to work to close. There's no activity. That $141 is interest earned. Fund 40, Special Reserve, that's the fund I mentioned. We do a lot of projects throughout the district with that fund, and that is a fund that does not have a source of revenue. So once we spend that down, that fund will not have any more funds to spend. Bond interest and redemption, that is something that we don't really have control over. It's on our books. That is automatically generated through the bonds that we generate. The bonds require servicing, so interest is collected from the community. It's deposited in the fund, and payments are made to bondholders through the fund. And Fund 62 is our Charter Schools and Enterprise Fund. That's ICS. That is their fund, and they end the year with a $7 million reserve. It's an overview of all of our pandemic resources. As you can see, there's many of them.
That's, I mean, the other question.
I have a question before we go on to the next page. In regards to the Student Activity Special Revenue Fund, change of fund balance, you're talking about spending $63,000 more than we did the year before. My question to you is, why now? Why are we adding this on when another item here is cutting people and their salaries and their positions? Why do we need this? What's the purpose of it?
So GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they came out with an opinion that all school districts must have this fund on their books to account for associated student body activity separate from Fund 1.
So is this opinion law
It is.
or recommendation?
It is law.
So we are required to do it.
Yeah, if we had not done it, then it would have been an audit finding, and we would have been required to comply with it.
Okay, thank you.
So here's an overview of all of our pandemic resources. There are multiple resources. We don't anticipate receiving any more resources from the federal or state government. What we know of is what you see in front of you. Overall, we have $27 million total that was promised to us, $27.5 million. We have received $9.9 million of that. And again, a lot of these funds are federal in nature, so we have to spend the money to receive the money. All of the funds have different timelines. So the longest that it'll reach is 2024. ESSER 3 will end in September 30th, 2024. The rest of the funds, the resources have different timelines, and we always make sure that we meet those timelines. We don't want to give any of these funds back. Overall, we've spent $11.4 million. You'll notice there's a difference between received and expended. That's because in transition, we're waiting for those money to reclaim the money. We will wait to receive it from the federal government. And the remaining balance is $16 million.
So basically what you're saying is that every time we spend this money we're supposed to get, so we're going in debt?
Correct.
And how good are they about paying us back?
They're very good.
Okay, just making sure.
It's quarterly,
Okay, it feels important.
Yeah.
Thanks.
because it does impact cash flow. So here's a look at how we updated the budget for the 21-22 fiscal year. We began the budget when the board adopted the budget in June. The adjustments are in the middle, and the budget as it stands is the last column to the right. As of August 31st, we're looking at an operating deficit of $1.5 million. And that's because our expenditures exceed our revenues. Keep in mind, this is a projection for the fiscal year. So we're projecting to have a $1.5 million deficit throughout the 21-22 fiscal year. We project to have a beginning fund balance, $23.4 million. So that will leave us with a fund balance of $21 million, 21.8. Restricted part of that is $368,000. Assignments of the ending fund balance is $19 million, which leaves us with a 26% reserve. Some of the changes in the budget, we did update the LCFF part of the budget. So the LCAP portion of it, the Local Control Accountability Plan, it did go up from a 50% to 65% concentration grant. That was a major portion of the increase in revenues. Carryovers for departments and sites, we did budget for that in our expenses. We increased salaries and benefits to reflect hiring. So anyone that was hired between July 1st till August 31st is reflected in the budget. We did decrease positions that we do not intend to fill for the rest of the fiscal year. And state unemployment insurance, we had budgeted for 1.23%. So every dollar of salary, there was 1.23% of unemployment insurance we had to pay. That was reduced by the state to 0.5%. So that's reflected in the budget as well. So our next steps, we will submit our unaudited actuals to the County Office of Ed. Our auditors are scheduled to to continue auditing our 2021 fiscal year. They will be in the next few weeks to conduct the audit. First interim budget will be presented in December. First interim is a look at our projected for the fiscal year and our actuals as of October 31st. And a comprehensive audit will be presented in January. So as the auditors complete their audit, they will present in January to the board. And I just wanted to thank our fiscal department that helped in the fiscal year, not only throughout the year, but to put our unaudited actuals together. And I could answer any questions if there are.
Is Mr. Wilkerson still our auditor?
Yes.
Any questions? Ms. Gates?
So I do have a few. So for instance, on the page where and I'm gonna have to remember if I remember what I wrote my notes for. The unaudited Fund 1 combined books and supplies. So I'm wondering, we didn't spend as much as we anticipated because we weren't here.
Correct.
Is that money rolled forward anticipating, or is that money kept?
So depending on where that money is, so some of the site carryover, it will roll over into the next year for the site.
Okay.
Whereas if it's not part of the site, so for instance, if it's part of the Ed Services Department, that money will go back into the ending fund balance.
I just know that when it's come down to like real life in the classroom, students are still, I swear, eating pencils for lunch instead. So some of the supplies things, I mean, we're just hitting the supply closets really hard as we're getting back into school, and we've had losses. I know teachers, like when it comes to classroom books, that March 13th, a lot of teachers went, hey, what resources can I send home with my kids? And some of those have ended up as losses in the classroom, hopefully gains, because we hope that what we sent home with kids actually they kept and actually and used and read and all of that. So I don't think any teachers are really lamenting having sent stuff home with kids, but we do lament the loss in classroom for some of those things. So that was one of my questions. I did have another one, but it looks like Dr. Brady wants to say something.
I just wanted to add that on slide 8, you saw the ending fund balance assignments. So we had books and supplies, curriculum materials, there under curriculum adoption. That's probably, that's a lot of money put aside for an adoption because science is in there and that comes with a lot of those materials as well. But if it came down to needing more money, this is an assignment set aside for books and supplies. We could also use this assignment toward that as well.
Mrs. Sarah, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I got a question regards the restricted fund balance and the unaudited actuals. You mentioned that reserve for economic uncertainty. Sorry, thank you. You put 3% on expenditures.
Correct.
You just said it, verbally, but it says, can you explain a little bit more on that? I didn't quite understand that.
Sure.
This is money assigned or allocated for.
So by law, the school district is required to have 3% of reserves in their ending fund balance, meaning we have to have we have to be able to cover 3% of our total expenses in our ending fund balance with unrestricted money. Okay. So any money that is unrestricted, meaning we could use it for any purpose, we have to cover all of our expenses, including restricted expenses, 3% of it. Okay. In reality, 3% for us is not even 2 weeks of payroll. Mm-hmm. It won't get us very far.
That's what I want you to clarify, that part for me and for the audience too. And coming back to Board Trustee Sarmiento in regards to student activity special revenue funds, I know that if we have in school, the money is given to the schools depending on the student amount, right? It's not like evenly for everybody. It's the revenue fund that is given to the school is just given, or this is even for every school, or is depending on the school students, the amount of the students that there are.
Fund 8 is actually money that the ASBs raise. Mm-hmm. It's not money that the district contributes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Gates?
So you mentioned, same page, for the cafeteria special revenue that we need to put a plan together because we can only have 3 months of expenses set aside.
Right.
So, but that right now we have the extra the 2.6 million. Right. So we have some ideas of how we can utilize that money and utilize it well.
Well, that's something
before having to send it back.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to work on, mm-hmm. And also we'll work with the state on that.
Okay.
There's an analyst that's assigned to every school district, and that's something we work together on. We don't want to spend money for the sake of spending money. We want to make sure we use it wisely. It's an outlier. We've never had most cafeteria funds operate in the negative. Mm-hmm. So for us to have a surplus this year is extraordinary. So we want to make sure whatever we spend it on is one time in nature. Okay. It's not ongoing commitments, but it's something we will work on, and we do have to work with the state on that.
Okay.
Dr. Brady? Yes, just to add, the reason we have such a large surplus this year is because our CNS department did an amazing job feeding lunches and breakfast to all children that came through our school district. So they didn't have to go to the national school district, but we had such great distributions that we got students from Sweetwater, we got students from our own school district, we got other children from around the county that came to our school district. So we got credit for every one of those meals. and we were reimbursed, and that's how we were able to increase that. So that's a real kudos to our CMS team, because that represents a lot of fed children during the pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion by Ms. Lizarraga and a second by Ms. Sarmiento to approve the 2020-2021 unaudited actuals financial report. Please vote.
Motion passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Item 17B is to approve the budget restructuring plan as attached. Mr. Albanesian?
Yes. Oh, you have any PowerPoint? Thank you. Good evening, Board, Cabinet. So I just presented our unaudited actuals, which was very good news for our performance for last year in terms of financially. But the reality is we have very striking declining enrollment. We have much lower ADA, average daily attendance this year, than we're historically have. So what I'll present tonight is a restructuring plan for the school district to reflect the fact that we have shrunk 12% over the last 2 fiscal years, and the school district has not shrunk. We have not laid off one person to reflect the decline in our enrollment over the last 2 years, and we've been fortunate, but that time is of the essence, so to speak. It will catch up to us. So I will present a plan tonight to kind of address the decline and how we can move forward with it.
Okay.
So I wanted to just show a timeline of how the restructuring and the budget has been discussed with the board over the last 2 years. In March 11, 2020 was the first time really that the board was sort of made aware of the need to cut expenses. There wasn't a resolution that was adopted. May 20th, there was a budget workshop for 2021 budget. June 1st, 2020, there was a resolution adopted. July 21st, there was a resolution adopted. December 15th, and so on and so forth. So there's been a lot of presentations and resolutions brought to the board over the last 2 fiscal years. Just wanted to define what it means for a deficit and structural spending. So a deficit is is the amount by which spending exceeds revenue over a particular period of time. And we could have planned for deficit spending. So for instance, if we want to adopt curriculum and we know we have to dip into our unrestricted funds to purchase that, that's a planned deficit spending. Whereas what we have right now is a structural deficit. So regardless of how well the economy does, we have expenses that far exceed our revenues, and we will never be able to close that gap without reducing our expenses. Even with increased enrollment, the expenses will exceed what we receive in revenue. We would need tremendous increases in enrollment to offset our expenses. I wanted to highlight, and it can't see the bottom of there, but this is the trend of how our spending has been since local control funding formula was law. In 2013-14, it became the law. We've had operating surpluses since 13-14, We had deficit spending in 18-19, 19-20. So the trend started, and it would have continued in the 2021 fiscal year if not for all of the one-time money that we received from the pandemic. We're looking at a $227,000 surplus this fiscal year, 21-22. But as you see, that changes next fiscal year. We're looking at a deficit spending of $8.8 million next fiscal year, and that continues to $8.9 million in the 23-24 fiscal year. So we're looking at spending almost 17 to 18 million more in our expenses than we're receiving in revenue. So that will come from our ending fund balance. So the district did hire fiscal consultants who made recommendations for reductions. Those recommendations were presented February 17th to the board. And these are recommendations that we've seen before. The total of the recommendations was $4.1 million. The district did put together a budget reduction task force. They made some of their own recommendations. These are some of their recommendations, which did add up to $4.3 million. What we're proposing tonight is to move forward with what there was agreement on between the fiscal advisor and the budget reduction task force. So those items that both the consultant and the budget reduction task force agreed to, we are recommending with moving forward with that, effective as of July 1st, 2022. So we won't see any savings in the current fiscal year. They will begin next fiscal year. And these savings would be ongoing savings. So we are proposing reducing classroom positions by 15 FTE. That would save $1.7 million starting next fiscal year. We're proposing reducing transportation student attendance by 8. That would be a savings of $136,000. We're proposing restructuring 4 supervisory positions. That would be a savings of $80,000. We would reduce 1 office technician in the district office. That would be a $70,000 savings. And we would reduce the lead language assessment center instructional assistant. There are 2 positions currently. That would be a savings of $58,000 ongoing. And one thing that we are recommending that both the groups did not present would be a reduction of campus student supervisors by 10 FTE, which would be a savings of $113,000. Total phase 1 savings would be $2.8 million starting next fiscal year. So we won't see any impact in this fiscal year. It will begin next fiscal year, and it will be also for the 3rd year out. So $2.1 million next fiscal year. That would compound to $4.2 million the next fiscal year if we move forward with these reductions. Some of the steps we have taken to reduce our expenses. We have reduced site discretionary budgets by $300,000. We've looked at our contracts. We've reduced the contracts we can by $100,000. We have changed the funding for field trips from unrestricted to LCAP, local control funding from local control accountability plan. That'd be $35,000 in savings from unrestricted funds. We've reduced 1 FTE vice principal position. That's $155,000 savings. 6 teaching positions have been left unfilled through attrition. That's savings of $690,000. 3 transportation student attendant positions have been left unfilled. That's a savings of $51,000 for a total realized savings of $1.3 million this fiscal year. So we will actually save $1.3 million this fiscal year. Those were ongoing, one-time things that we've done. We funded 30 FTE through pandemic funds, and that is on the ed services side. So counselors and psychologists, IT positions. We've been able to move those positions to pandemic funding for the current fiscal year, 2022. So that will save the district $3.1 million in unrestricted funds. That is one time though. We funded continuing operation through pandemic funds in the 2021 fiscal year of $3.8 million. So expenses last year that we would have incurred through our unrestricted funds, we were able to move those expenses to pandemic funds. So we were able to save $3.8 million in unrestricted funds. That was a one-time savings. So we've already been able to lessen the burden on the unrestricted fund by $7 million solely because we were able to charge those expenses to pandemic funds. Phase 2 of our plan, we would immediately establish a budget committee, and the budget committee would be comprised of stakeholders from both union organizations of the district, management, hopefully parents in the community. We want a broad swath of representation in our budget committee, and the goal would be to identify reductions throughout the district, every department. Another goal of the committee would be to identify possible schools that would be closed in the future. And that would also depend on our demographic study to look at where our populations are, where they're declining, where they're increasing. And we want to be able to bring a recommendation to the board that is informed through our study and not do it in a way that we could lessen the impact on all of our other schools. So that would be one of the recommendations that the committee works on. We do hope to start in September with advertising for applications in the committee and start and meet in the end of this calendar year. So September, we go through the process of looking at applications, who's interested. October, we start scheduling meetings and actually possibly meeting by the end of October. Keep in mind, there is a deadline for reductions of certificated staff and possibly classified staff. If the law is passed at the state level, will need to be notified by mid-March if their job will be affected. So we have to do that work much sooner than mid-March to make sure we have our seniority lists in order, we have our notifications in order to make sure we abide by the law and that employees are notified by the deadline. Otherwise, we cannot move forward with reductions. The target for reductions is $8.2 million, and I'll show you why. That may seem like a high number, but that's a reflection of our declining enrollment. Well, it got caught off here, but that $8.2 million, that is what our deficit spending is. And the reality is, if we want to no longer have a deficit spending like we did in the past, we would have to identify $8.2 million in reductions throughout the district to go back to spending that is more in line with what we've historically done. So you can answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Yes, I have a question, yeah. The budget committee, can you please tell us how does it be the hiring or the recruitment process? You mentioned parents and some of the staff, and so if whoever's eligible or interested to participate can do that, or how is going to be the selection process?
We'll work on the parameters on that. We want to make sure that there's adequate representation from all stakeholders, but we want to make sure it's not to the point where decision-making can occur. We want consensus, so we don't want it to be too large, but we want it also to be reflective of all the stakeholders. We'll work on an application for that, and then we'll make sure that we make the community aware of it. We want to make sure it's very inclusive.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hernandez?
Yes, so I just want to add that with our labor groups, they do have the opportunity to pick their members that participate. They can also be vetted through some type of application process that they'd like, but they do get to choose their members.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gates?
I know you want to keep it small, but our pockets of neighborhoods and schools are very different. And So I would just encourage that we have, when it comes to the community voices, that we represent that well across. Ira Harbison is a very different neighborhood than Lake Acres, is a very different neighborhood than Kimball. You know, National City is small, but our pockets are very unique. And so I don't know how many you're thinking, but the voices at each of those places will be different. So I encourage you to consider that in your thinking process.
And it's a difficult thing to start discussing reductions. There will be a commitment from those who want to participate, and we're going to definitely make sure that we have representative voices from each of the various communities.
I do have another just quick articulation. Like you have on here, for instance, reduce campus student supervisors by 10. Like my first thought is if we are reducing students, that is probably one of our thoughts behind it. If we have fewer students to watch, that would have a direct impact on that. I know that there are appropriate numbers for that are established for supervisors to be out for recess duty or watching the cafeteria or things like that. And I know that those are agreed upon numbers. And I know we like as many eyes on our kids as we can get. I understand that. But I'm assuming that one of the major impacts here is if we have fewer kids.
Correct. We have to restructure our district to reflect the fact that we have fewer kids to serve. So services have to be in line with the number of students we have.
Okay.
And
that's in all areas that are actually hands-on with children is what basically
those are generally because we have those numbers, they're easier to look at in terms of what services need to be provided. All areas need to be looked at. And there's no area in the district that we can not look at, to be honest. An $8.2 million deficit spending, that requires a look at everywhere. There's no part of the district that should be left immune to reductions.
Dr. Hernandez?
Yeah, and so of course, we always look at loss of services, and loss of students equals our loss of services. And so that is how we look at any type of layoff, apart of course from the funding source, but definitely lack of services is one area that we look at. And so for example, campus student supervisors with schools that used to be at 600, 700 students are now less than 500, then of course we're looking at the reduction in students to supervise has lessened. And so therefore, where we may have needed more supervisors during the lunch duty, we don't need as many because we don't have the number of students that are there anymore.
Thank you.
Ms. Sarmiento?
Yes, I just have a question. Tonight, are we approving the budget restructuring plan or are we approving layoffs?
You're approving the plan because we will have to work on that part of it. So if you approve the plan tonight, we will start working on what goes into putting the plan in action.
And the reason I ask is that I understand that we have retirees, people who may retire in the next year or so, and I just want to make sure that we look at those that we're considering, whether it's to change their title and decrease the amount we pay them, or is this somebody that if they plan on retiring next year, then maybe we need to look at somebody else instead, that sort of thing. I know the retirees don't always make up their mind to take that step early on, but it's a question that I would be curious to find out, before we make these hard and fast rules about how we're going to proceed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is a fluid situation where things are changing every day.
Right.
And of course, any kind of savings, we will definitely adjust our budget to reflect that. But at $8.2 million is just such a large sum that we would, I could eliminate everyone in the district office and we still wouldn't make up the difference of 8.2 million.
Dr. Brady?
Yes, I had just a couple of clarifications. The first is for the campus student supervisors and how that number came about. We do use a staffing formula. We are working with Mr. Evanescence on staffing formulas across all of our departments. But there's that art and science, right? So in addition to the formula of how many per how many students, we also have to look at the layout of the school, how many recesses are happening, where the students are locating. And so Dr. Hernandez did work personally with every single principal to determine how many campus student supervisors they needed to cover their existing schedules. As we look toward more reductions, there may be times we have to close parts of the playground so that we could keep kids safe and be able to operate within other staffing formulas. But for right now, this is the cut recommended with the existing schedules in place. The second piece of clarification is you talked about different communities coming together with the budget reduction task force, and we are going to be looking at overall operations of a school district. So there's different ways that we'll try to recruit people, that have an interest in school operations. Maybe they have a background in some, where they can give an insight in finance or in a school setting. I think where it's going to become really important to hear the voices of the different pockets of the community is when we start talking about potentially closing a school. And in that case, we'll probably look at a subcommittee to be looking at the school closures, because there's going to be a lot of conversation around what the recommendation is from the demographic study and what ultimate decision the board decides to make if we choose to close a school. So we'll have to have those voices. And then the third clarification is, yes, tonight is just the budget reduction plan, but those will trigger resolutions that we will bring to the board, and you will need to adopt the resolutions for layoffs. And so those layoffs resolutions would be effective at that time of the board vote. But this is the plan that precedes those resolutions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the budget restructuring plan as attached?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I have a motion by Ms. Gates and a second by Ms. Lizarraga. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Next, we have board cabinet communications. Ms. Lizarraga.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to welcome the new employees, and Special Kimball will be happy to receive Mr. Lopez in there. I would like to thank you for my birthday card that is coming up. And I would like to wish everybody a good night. And also, I'm excited to announce that my marine biology son got hired in Ocean Connectors. So you're going to see him around.
Nice.
He just started on probably next week. And he did it by himself, not from us. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Ms. Gates.
Well, thank you, Mr. Evanescence and your entire team for this. I know that, you get to stand up here and it looks like very nice, slide deck was put together, but I don't even know if I want to know how many hours and how much conversation and how many background pieces and talks you and your team put in and working with the rest of the administration and their teams as well to come with something cohesive. But thank you for that, and thank you for doing your best to make it clear, especially because not everybody does this thing every day. I don't. I'd also like to welcome our new employees because that's just fun
to have new people stepping in and becoming a part of us. I had the opportunity to be out at a couple school sites since school has begun. So thank you to Central teachers and thank you to Ira Harbison teachers for letting me show up and invade your premises for at least a little bit. That's always, and it's just always cool. I successfully married off my son.
Yay.
So I that's that's a neat thing. Married him off and picked up an extra child along the way. But as we are approaching fall break, I want to wish everyone a good last 7 days. Students, please pay attention for the last 7 days. Teachers, you can actually hold it together for those 7 days. Staff, you continue to take care of everyone the way you do. It's a beautiful gift to all of us. And have a wonderful fall break. We won't see you between now and then, so have a wonderful fall break.
And they won't see us, so that's a good thing too. I'd like to welcome the new employees as well. That's, as you say, it's a good thing. Happy birthday to Rosina and Michelle. When are your birthdays anyways?
I get all fall break, so 25th for me.
It's the 23rd.
Of what, September?
Yes,
23rd and 25th?
it was a good month.
Okay, okay, we're
It's a wonderful moment.
Okay, also, happy fall break to everyone. I'll be enjoying it along with all of you. That's all I have, thank you.
Mr. Albanese?
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to thank the Transportation Department. They have been just working tirelessly throughout the year to transport our kids. They show up every day and they just do an incredible job. And I'm really thankful we started with the same number of bus drivers. We still have the same number of bus drivers right now. A lot of surrounding districts are having a lot of trouble with transportation, so the lack of bus drivers, and we fortunately have an incredible team, and they're doing just an outstanding job with transporting our students. So I just wanted to thank them.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez.
So I'd also like to welcome the new employees. Really, I'm happy that we are filling all our custodial positions and our M&O positions. And then, of course, happy birthday to Trustee Lizarraga and Trustee Gates. I hope you have a wonderful time.
Dr. Crock?
I like to echo what Dr. Hernandez said and welcome our new employees and wish you both a very happy birthday. And thank the staff, everybody, for working together as a team. We've done amazing work, and walking the sites, I'm seeing incredible learning.
Thank you. Dr. Brady?
Yes, I just wanted to share that on Tuesday, we started our asynchronous testing on site. We had a testing start at Rancho de la Nacion at 6:30 in the morning, the day after Labor Day, and we had 5 students from 5 different classes that were identified, and through the course of the day, we had another 8 classes. So we had 13 classes on Monday that were testing either in the morning or in the afternoon. Not the entire class, but students that have been identified as close contacts. Our parents, we got a wonderful feedback from them that they were very thankful that it was right there in the district, and that their students could participate in a modified quarantine, which means they could quarantine at school as long as they tested right away and continued to test every 3 days with no symptoms and a negative test. So of course I wanted to see how it was going to work and make sure it was going to roll out okay. So I showed up on Tuesday morning and participated in it myself, and the results came directly to my email. It was quick, it was easy, and I got within 24 hours my test results that, oh, by the way, I have a negative COVID test. You don't have to put that in the minutes. But I just wanted to see what the process would feel like for a parent participating, and so it was really super easy. And again, like I said, we were getting some good feedback. We are getting some questions, so we're putting out some FAQs, doing some communication. It is not for symptomatic students or staff. We want to keep our potentially COVID or COVID positive people at the medical facilities, and school will just be for the modified quarantine. The other piece is that we know parents and the office staff, the principals, of course, our human resources department need some help with that after hours contact trace support, meaning everybody who's identified as a close contact needs a personal phone call. They need follow-up letters. If you were in a vicinity where there was a COVID positive, you need a community non-close contact letter. You need to know about the testing. You need a reminder to go for the testing. And there's a lot of questions, and we know that our staff, it's been a heavy lift, but that system, the board approved that contract, and that will be, they are in the process of hiring bilingual support for that. They have one person identified, and they do a training with them, a Dale Carnegie training before they get implemented. So we're hoping within the next week or so that will be up and running, and then we'll do a mass communication to let everybody know. We wanted things to make sure it was running smoothly, work out the bugs, and then we're going to do some more communication around that. And then I just want to say happy birthday to Trustee Gates, Trustee Lasaga, and also to Dr. Hernandez, who will be celebrating this month with you as well.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to wish Rocio Lizarraga and Michelle Gates a very happy birthday. Happy you are part of our team. And I'd like to thank Mr. Albanese for his reports this evening. And I'd like to wish everyone a very, very wonderful break. And I'd like to ask everyone here to please join us for some cakes. We have some birthday cakes.
Oh, thank you.
And so with that, I bid you a good evening, and I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.